He was a graduate of Duke Divinity School and studied under Bill, and he remained a good friend for the remainder of Bill's life. And came to visit Bill several times over the course of their lives, and up until Bill's death, basically. Sam is going to share with us specifically reflections of a white ghetto preacher on the influence of the thought and spirit of William H. Poteet on preaching in the civil rights movement. One last word about Sam. I first heard about him. I didn't know him when he was at Duke or when I was there, but I learned about him through Patricia Poteet, and she said, "This is somebody you ought to invite to the conference." She didn't know how to contact him. I had to look him up, and in fact, I did a search on the internet and found a wonderful article or two about his career of being the head minister, preacher at a black Methodist church in Kansas City. Is that right?
It's not a Methodist church.
Oh, I thought it was Methodist. Okay,
I was raised Methodist.
Okay, I got my wires crossed somewhere.
That's all right.
Maybe say a little bit more about that.
They say it's Methodist.
But anyway, in this particular article that I read online was that he had developed an extraordinary rapport with the black Christian community. And there had been some skepticism, maybe even in the local church at time initially, but they just became completely sold on him. And they really liked, how many years was it?
It's, I'm the emeritus now, it's been 42 years.
42 years. He was the minister at this, what was it, like 95% or more black?
More.
More. 100% black in Kansas City. So please welcome Sam.
I want to say about anything.
About Bill.
I want to say one thing, and in relation to what you said about that funeral. I read an essay, one of his essays, and it was written about the time I was a Duke. I was a campus minister for 10 years, at age 68. And during that time, the whole idea of the death of God, sometime during that time, being discussed. And Poteet said in the essay, people are talking about the death of God. And students are dying in the dormitory for the lack of somebody who knows their name and speaks it. And he spoke your name. He gave you a name too, a nickname. And it sounds like you like it.
Oh, I love it.
Yes, you do.
I love it. I do. I love everything he did.
There you go.
I felt like he loved it.
He did.
Yeah.
And he cut right through when he said, it's a bunch of shit, this business about the death of God, when all you need to do is walk right next door and speak to this person and say, who are you? How are you? I hope you're well. Well, that spoke to me. I just read that in the last 3 or 4 weeks, but I was there. And I've done some soul searching too about, how much was I part of the ideology of this or not versus the personal speaking and saying your name. I thank you for what you.
You said that now is the time for a new relationship.
as I heard you. And my question is, is that an always now? Or is it a now that there's some particular reason for calling that now?
I think we got some particularities we got to work on. I do think there's some particularities that's got to be dealt with that we're not dealing with. Yeah, that could wind up destroying us if they haven't already.
Yes.
If they haven't already, they could have. I mean, it could be too late. It could be too late. That's for sure. It could be too late. I think the issue of integration. I know you wanted everybody to tell these stories though, didn't you? But I was answering, is that all right if I answer this question?
Sure.
I think the issue of integration, we've made some progress on that. We got to deal with the issue of economic justice now to me. You got to get this creation under some kind of decent justice, I think, yeah. But it's always now. Yeah, I guess you're right. It's always now. Yeah.
One thing that Ann and I have talked about, we do live in a little coastal village on South Carolina, with about 450 people in the village. And just about the only times that the black community and the white community come together is things that Ann Knight does. And something that I have noticed and we've talked about is that our black friends in the village can make statements of their faith, and it makes all the sense in the world to me. If I hear white people use the same language to state their faith, I dismiss it as stuff and nonsense. And I don't know, that's a confession on my part, I'm sure, but it is something that I notice time and again.
I understand that. I think it's the difference in God in us and God being God. The God, the white man's God has been profaned. It has been profaned. Thurman talks about this point in his book, and he says, what difference did it make that the white man had given the black man his God? And he used the word his. Thurman always, he hadn't dealt with the gender thing. His God, when the slave couldn't tell the difference between slave sanction and freedom, and the God, because the God sanctioned the slavery. And he said that, and this is back to the point. He said, by some amazing, I'm glad you raised this. By some amazing spiritual insight. By some amazing spiritual insight, the slave undertook the redemption of a religion the master had profaned in his midst. By some amazing spiritual insight. It is a different religion. It is a different religion. It's a religion of power and it's just it is a different word. The words are different. That's another thing Poteet talked about. But you remember the card game, Are we playing 52 pickup or are we playing bridge? The card game, we may be using the same words, but the card game is a different, I remember he used that he did use that, didn't he?
I remember that in my experience, but that doesn't mean, I can't generalize.
Yeah.
Anybody else know that story?
Action. And in 1954, that essay I referred to in my talk, he talks about the incarnation is God in me.
No.
And so I think that there is a theme in Bill, like Thurman, so that they're really together. And I think, I don't know, but his effort to achieve an intellectual equilibrium between scientific and religious is an effort to be able to affirm that presence of God in me, in you. And so I think that you, in fact, were embodying what he was trying to recover the ground for us all to be able to do, and probably in search of his own, in search of his soul, which he hadn't lost, he's just trying to get to it.
Did you ever know him to be in despair?
No.
Did anybody?
No.
Sure. Yeah, no, he lived a real life. You know, you look in the biography somebody wrote, and there's yeah, he got divorced, and he agonized through all of that, and he had a son, Mac, who took him on and said, I'm not going to be who you want me to be. And I remember one night he went out in the woods yelling his name, Mac, Mac. Mac had run off and taken a tent, and he couldn't find him, and he and I were supposed to go to Washington, and you know, we just had to cancel it because he couldn't find Mac. And that went on for several years, and Mac ended up becoming a Jehovah's Witness. And I've been in the house where they just argued face to face, you know, and Mac was sure he was going to die if he didn't convert his dad, you know. And then he ended up marrying a woman 15 years older than he was, with 3 kids, a black woman who at that time was not an ordinary kind of thing to be doing back, you know. And so that whole track was cause of enormous agony and even despair. He went through a divorce, and that was not a tidy, easy thing. And he married one of my students, and that was not an easy thing. But he was struggling with a lot of stuff. I mean, he was not, in my view, I mean, everybody's got their own piece of him, obviously, but I see him, first of all, as a person, not as a scholar or an academician or that sort of thing. That's just how I got to know him. But he was no different from any of us in that way. And he tried out stuff. He went to, back in the 60s when it was popular to go to these group things, you know, and talk about who you are and listen to who other people are.
I'm okay, you're okay.
Yeah, therapy groups kind of stuff, you know, and he'd come over to my house and I'd say, what the hell are you doing? I don't, it didn't make any sense, you know, I never did that stuff. So he was open to all kind of stuff, but he had peaks and valleys, and he had pain, and he had disillusionment, and he had a job that he had to show up for, just like everybody else in the room, and a family that had all kinds of problems. And you know, he was a real guy. There was no pure intellectual surfing the waves that came out in class and wrote books and so on at all. It was certainly part of his life and a big part of his life, but it was not his life in that sense, I would say.